Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. So Mr. Blake is actually here. He's not going to speak or participate, but he's here. So every now and then if you see me making eye contact this way, it's because I'm talking to him. He's nodding. Thank you. This is, I think it's like basically protein powder and iced coffee. Thank you. So I guess we'll start by airing our grievances. I think we did that 2 weeks ago, and that seemed to work great for me. So let's open with, remember when I didn't like my haircut? Now that it's grown out, I don't like it even more. So that's grievance number one. These can be petty. Go ahead and pause this. Give me your petty grievance. The pettier the better, honestly, because I'm aware that there are many people doing much worse. But anyway, let's talk about my haircut, which is going out horrifyingly. And also, my eyebrows are a mess. And I've been getting some terrible hormonal acne that I can't do anything about. So those are my petty grievances. So I posted the spell discussion for Orlando. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because I went on such a rant on Tumblr that you probably don't need me to do it twice. But definitely join in if you would like. And then I will let you know what the next spell read is going to be next week. Lastly, you may have noticed I did not update the Princess's Guide to Popular Statecraft last week because I started writing Mr. Brightside and the Atomic Bomb instead, which Mr. Blake can attest is something I've been talking about for a long time. He's nodding. I was talking about how I wanted to write a musical for the Killers, and he was like, why? And that's not a question I make a habit of answering. So anyway, I've been writing a musical for the Killers. That is actually what it is. On AO3, so that is available to you. I will probably update that again this week, and then I will switch off between that and the Princess's Guide. I think I just needed a break from that story's world, and this story is really fun for me, but also I do want to finish the story I had initially started, so after this week, they will switch back and forth in updates. Okay. Can I have another sip, please? Thank you. I've done some work on this. He says it's his. But then again, he made a vow, and what's his is mine. He reminds me of this vow whenever what's mine is his. So I think it's fair. Okay, so first question. I kind of get this a lot with people always saying, feel free to totally disregard this if it's uncomfortable. But this person was wondering if I would be open to talking a little bit more about the financials of self-publishing. So this person is a first-time writer that's inspired by the work that I produce, and they're not sure how to balance something like that with a day job. Someone else says, what do I do for my day job? Does it have anything to do with writing? Do I recommend that someone who's looking to make a living writing also write for their day job? Okay, so this is not an uncomfortable question. I will tell you right up front that I don't make enough money as a self-published author to live on, not even close. I know that it is possible, but in order to do it, I would have to pick a genre that sells more in the self-publishing area. So fantasy does pretty well, urban fantasy, but like romance especially, if you want to self-publish romance, people who read romance ebooks, they buy a lot of them. Also with the expectation that those ebooks are fairly cheap. So you would want to be you'd have a pretty constant output. I did once read someone's financials on this, that you would have to put out a book basically every couple of months, and then you might be able to generate an income over time. Because it's definitely, I don't make a ton of money when I just like release a book. It's more like people who continuously buy books that have been out for a while. I self-publish through Amazon, so they print the books for me. I don't make a lot of money on print books. I basically price all of my books so that I make $1. You know, I try to be a little bit realistic about my audience. I also know my weaknesses, which are I'm not super good at marketing myself. You may have noticed that. I don't love doing the hashtags on my posts and stuff. It just feels sort of disingenuous to me. I think a lot of people do handle it well, and I'm just not one of those people, which is why I would probably not make the majority of my income doing this. So that being said, I do need a day job, and I think I would recommend for anyone who wants to be a self-published author that they are going to either need a day job, most likely that a partner who, thanks to Mr. Blake, is financially responsible for most of our household, or, family. You'd be getting support from somewhere. You would need to be financially assisted by someone because you don't make a lot of money, certainly not right off the bat. Especially with self-publishing, you have to build your audience. I would say, coming from fan fiction, a very, 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 very small percentage of the people who read my fan fiction actually buy my original work. I'm going to say it's like, I don't know, 5%. It's something really, really small. And I think that has been the experience with a lot of fan fiction authors who have tried to transition into original fiction. And I understand original fiction and fan fiction are really different. Just in terms of what people are looking for when they're coming to fanfic, they're looking for the familiar characters, the familiar tropes. If they wanted to read original work, then they would read original work. So as much as it is nice to have a built-in audience, and probably most of you who watch these videos are that built-in audience for me, where you know that you trust me as a writer and you're going to kind of go whatever world I want to drag you into, it's not that common. So even if you do have a significant fan fiction audience, you can't necessarily transition right into making money off that audience. So, which again, totally fair. You don't really, I have been accused in the past of like leveraging my fan fiction audience to make money off of them, which is not what I'm doing. It's just that I think when you want to go into self-publishing, the idea is just that you have stories and you have an audience for it and you want to tell these stories, but you're not really trying to milk that audience so much as grow people who are more interested in your original fiction, which again is something you would do through social media management and probably also some upfront costs like attending conventions and stuff like that, which can be challenging. You really want to think of yourself as a writer, as an artist. This is something I talked about with Little Kimura last week, that you are basically a small business. You yourself and what you produce are your small business. So think of it that way, that any small business is really difficult to build right from the start, and especially something like books, which are kind of hard to sell anyway. So bearing that in mind, you definitely want to, if you have a day job now, hang on to that day job. And that's not even necessarily just self-publishing. Most authors, I think the average income for a traditionally published author is about $30,000 per year, which even that is a super rough estimate. It's more like a common advance would be $30,000, and then you still have to pay that out. So you would still have to sell that much and earn it back. This is the way it works for music as well. They're giving you this money with the expectation that that's how much you are going to earn for them. But basically you kind of end up with a loan. Also, as a writer or an artist or anything like that, you are paying taxes. I'm speaking about this as an American writer. You're paying taxes at a pretty high rate because at that point you're paying the 1099 taxes, which is close to, I want to say 40% of your income. So a lot of that, say you make $30,000 on one book as the advance, and then about 40% of that is going to taxes. So yeah, you want a day job is kind of the gist of this. So I am a graphic designer. That is how I made the majority of the money I was making for the last couple of years. And I've transitioned out of that, not because I don't like graphic design, but because I really don't like selling myself. So I don't enjoy having to find clients. So I had really a fairly consistent client base for a while because I was transitioning from working in real estate where I was making my own maps as a broker, to then making maps for development companies, to then just kind of scaling back and thinking this isn't really what I want to spend my time doing. In terms of what I would do for a day job, I'll be honest with you, I'm not totally sure yet what that's going to be. I'm kind of figuring it out, but I don't think that it would be any other form of writing. A lot of people ask me why I wouldn't want to write copy or, blog or whatever, and it's just, For me, writing is all a very similar energy. Trying to communicate ideas is all one energy. So I can either expend that on my own fiction or on whatever I'm getting paid to do. It's not like, yeah, they're different skill sets, but to me, it takes the same amount of energy. So that's why I don't do it. But I'm sure there are plenty of people who would say that that is something that works for them. I have met people who their day job is to write copy and stuff, and I have noticed that their productivity is lower than mine. But, you know, I can't say whether that is a direct result or just a coincidence. What are you doing, Mr. Blake? He says he's drawing animated physics problems. I don't know what that means. What are they doing? Nothing yet. So, hello, can I ask for some motivation? I want to get back into exercising at least a couple of times a week, and it's difficult. One of my housemates used to make rude comments about my body, so I feel anxious exercising at the apartment with him around. We talked about it, and he keeps the comments to himself now, but I'm still not very comfortable. I know I really shouldn't let it get to me anymore, but I could use some support. I mean, I think that this is one of those things where you become more anxious about it the longer it kind of sits in your head. Things do get worse when they just fester in there, and I can understand why you wouldn't want to exercise at home with this person around, especially if it has been a while, because I know for me, that kind of feeling of being out of shape happens really quickly. Like I cannot exercise for a week and then all of a sudden I just feel sluggish, and that feeling of lethargy kind of affects my mood, and it also affects my view of myself. So it's a lot easier for me to feel down about my body when I haven't been exercising. So I can see what you mean about wanting motivation. There's a lot of things fighting against you here. Because obviously you have this person who made these comments, which are understandably hard to dismiss. I mean, just like any form of criticism, it's really hard to get. It's like a thorn that sticks in your head, and it's really hard to get that out. And then also because the times being what they are, and you can't, go to the gym and have pseudo privacy with like at least strangers. Now you have to exercise in your house with people who you already know have made weird comments about your body. Like I can see why this is a challenge. In terms of advice or motivation, I mean, I'll tell you just straight up, as much as it seems like it's going to suck, you will feel better after you do it. And I know that that feels incredibly hard to believe, and I have to say this to myself all the time. Mr. Blake gives me this speech all the time. Do you want to give me a version of this speech right now? Oh, he's not listening to me. Would you like to give a version of the speech you usually give me about how I'll feel better when it's done? He says, well, you will. That's how science works. Yeah. Exercise releases endorphins that make you feel better about yourself. Plus, you can feel accomplished. Are you purposely quoting Elle Woods? That exercise gives you endorphins. Endorphins make you happy. Happy people just don't kill their husbands. They just don't. Science. The point is you will feel better after you've exercised. So really what we want to do is get the motivation to doing the exercise. And I think mostly you want to do that in as comfortable an environment as you can create for yourself. So I actually think that maybe, I don't know what this other person who lives in the house, what their schedule is, but maybe you want to get up early to do this. I'm an early riser myself, not really by choice, mostly by habit, because of living with Mr. Blake. But I do feel that the early morning hours are a great time to work out. You can it might help to create a little bit of like a ritual for yourself. So maybe you get up a little earlier than usual and you reward yourself with, I don't know, if it's early enough, you can take a walk outside, maybe get some fresh air, have coffee or tea or whatever, have like kind of a relaxing start into your day. When I was in college and I first was kind of starting to motivate myself to work out, I think I felt kind of a similar way. I was living in my sorority house and I kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable sometimes working out, and we had like a small gym with just, I think it was 2 treadmills and an elliptical. Like that's how small it was, and sometimes it was really difficult to be in there with the like really skinny bouncy blonde ponytails. It was just kind of a little bit demoralizing from time to time. So I used to wake up really early. I think I would wake up at like probably 5:30 or 6, which in college was certainly very early. I'd go downstairs and kind of like run walk on the treadmill for like an hour, and then I would go get some orange juice and like kind of slowly move throughout the process of getting ready. I'd take like a fairly luxurious shower, and then it was nice to kind of go into that day feeling like I was prepared in some way. You know, the endorphins and the science of it, plus the feeling like I could take on whatever else was coming. Or if you're the opposite, you could wait until he goes to bed and exercise at night if that's something that you like. I mean, I hear there are people who enjoy the wee hours. I can't do that anymore, but I hear it's enjoyable. But anyway, I think it's okay if you feel like you need to hide a little bit at first. I feel confident that after you've kind of done this for a while, once you've established a schedule for yourself and you're exercising regularly, you'll feel less nervous about the prospect of exercising, and you won't really have to worry about whether he's around or not. You know, one thing you could do, depending on what sort of person he is just make him join you. I mean, if he has to focus on what he's doing, then he obviously can't make fun of you. So there's one option. But yeah, so I think you mostly have to worry about that first like couple of weeks where you're still kind of not feeling like you are motivated yet. I think that's when you want to really focus on how can you reward yourself for this behavior. Given the way that things are and wanting to feel good about your body, you probably want to make that reward something more like quality time with yourself. You can take that as whatever you'd like to take that as. Whatever quality time with yourself that you'd like to allow yourself. I find that I really enjoy reading in the morning. So maybe I don't know what you would be doing in your house. I don't know if maybe you want to do, I know that there are like some Zoom classes that some gyms are offering, or there's like workout videos that you could do. There's lots of people who do like yoga videos. You could do that. You could go for a walk. Even walking is a real improvement if you spend most of your time sitting down. Do you have any walking stats? Don't you say something about any form of exercise being, oh yeah. Mr. Blake says walking a mile and running a mile is the same thing. So that's something to definitely keep in mind if you just want to go for a walk. If you can. I think if you're out early enough, you should be able to do that. But yeah, go for a walk, go for a run, that sort of thing. And then, and then read for a little bit before you have to do any work or anything like that. So something to make yourself feel good about this time that you're dedicating to yourself. And to remember that this is something you're doing for yourself, and make sure you are reinforcing the idea that this is good for you and you feel good about it. I have a couple more things I could talk about, and I'm just going to pick one. So, hello, Miss Olivie Blake. Just wanted you to know that I adore your fics. Thank you. And then some compliments, which thank you very much. And they're curious what inspired my current writing style. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I'm actually not sure how to answer this question. I have heard in the past that my writing is what some people will call Gaiman-esque, so it sounds a little bit like Neil Gaiman. Other times it has been compared, I think because of the sense of absurdity, it's been compared to Lemony Snicket or Douglas Adams. And I think what that comes from is sort of a frothy tone that is saying sort of harsh truths. The observations that are being made in a very neutral tone is something that's common to all of those authors. And I don't know if that's a style so much as, well, I guess it is a style, but it is primarily a voice. But I'd like to think that I'm growing into my own voice. So the style that I am now, I think the style that I am now emulating should be my own. Well, okay. I think that I was sort of peak that Neil Gaiman quality right around, I actually remember specifically that I felt that my tone that I had taken on a very specific tone when I was writing Better If You Run, that was a couple of years ago. And I think from then on, you can kind of hear the quality of almost blitheness to the tone. That was kind of the first stage of developing this voice. And then it got kind of wordy. It got to the point where I felt like I was trying so hard to make the voice seem like kind of upbeat and quirky that it was almost sluggish to read. It was just like so many words, so many unnecessary words. And so from there, I've been definitely like cutting back and trying to finesse it. I think the dialogue has changed the most, not in the dialogue itself, but the way that it's constructed. Now I make much more of an effort for you to hear the character in the actual dialogue without me adding the tag of what specifically is happening. It was definitely overusing descriptions, I think. And now I've been trying to like let it breathe a little bit, which I think is something that I've gotten from reading a lot of literary fiction, which is kind of funny because I think that I was getting flowery in an almost... Not flowery. You know what the word is frothy. It was getting a little bit frothy, where it was just like, I'm having so much fun, like being this sort of narrator voice that I'm spending too much time on it, when really what's important here is the characters themselves and the kind of what they're going through. I don't need to be present so much as the author. And I think that has come from really just expanding the sorts of books I was reading. And I'm trying to think now of specific examples. I definitely feel like a major influence was Elena Ferrante. The Neapolitan novels are so, it's funny. She makes she has a lot of commentary as the narrator, but her points are very kind of blunt. They hit hard. The thing I'm thinking of specifically is the very last line of the first book, which I'm not going to say because I feel like it's quite a spoiler if you've never read it, but you really should. She's a little bit economical with what she's saying and how she's saying it, so that when she delivers a point, she really delivers it. And that's something that I've been focusing on kind of a lot. I've also been reading a lot more of female authors, and I think that has changed a little bit the way that I tell stories as well. I'm not sure how yet. I do feel like right now I'm in a transition period into yet another style. Do you have thoughts? I was hoping you would have thoughts because I don't. Did you notice anything different about my young adult that I wrote? No, he didn't notice anything different. But actually, I would say that one of the things that has majorly changed my writing style is the fact that I've had to write things that have shorter word counts. So I had to write a YA, which has kind of maxes out at 80,000, and I was trying to keep it more in the 65,000 range. And I wrote a literary manuscript, which that also shouldn't ever be more than 80. So in trying to tell a story without the freedom that I got so used to having of just using as many words as I wanted, I've kind of realized that what's actually important is not so much the froth. Let's see, what else have I read? I have really been reading a lot of stories about grief and loss lately. I think because I'm so just like angry and frustrated with the way that the world is, that I almost have to force myself to feel more genuine feelings, like sadness in fiction. I've had a lot of cathartic cries. I wouldn't say that any of the books that I've read recently have really influenced my style in a major way. I think the most recent two that I would say influenced the actual way I write were the Neapolitan novels and to some extent Andre Aciman. There's a lot of stuff I don't recommend by him. Certainly do not read the sequel to Call Me By Your Name, just don't. But Call Me By Your Name is excellent, as is Enigma Variations, and then stop there and don't read anything else. I have questions about him. When you read enough of an author's work, you start to see the author, and Aciman the man, it's a little bit questionable, but Aciman the author has a really interesting style with the way he expresses things. The way is similar to Ferrante, the way that thoughts are expressed in a prose that's very close to poetry. So that is definitely what I would call my more recent influences. I also think that reading a fair amount of nonfiction has mostly like the really almost fiction nonfiction. So like Three Women by Lisa Taddeo. I read The Book of Immortality by Adam, I can't remember his name. But it was very lyrical nonfiction, sort of like Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And all of this is to say that I think that it's more like I'm taking ownership of the story a little bit more. So I am telling more personal truths with my work as opposed to before. I think Masters of Death is kind of an example of this, where I was maintaining a tone where there was a real distance between me as the writer and then the plot and the characters. And I think it's just, you get that from the sense of eccentricity to the observations, basically. Yeah. Which is not to say that I don't do that still, because I definitely do. There are definitely, even now, passages that I'll write that I'll think, this is a particularly me passage. And usually it has that bounce to it, that sense of making sort of a wry observation in a dry, sort of almost caustic way. Then I'm like, oh, yep, there I am, that's me. But yeah, in terms of influences, I think that's where we are. One last sip and then I'm done here, I think. Do you have my dagger? Thank you. What a gentleman. We'll cover a couple of other things next week. Someone asked about friendship and I kind of saved it because it feels like a long answer because friendship is weird right now. It's like especially weird right now. But also we did touch on a lot of this last week in my video with Lil Kimura. I'm really just re-emphasizing things that we talked about briefly. But anyway, Mr. Blake, is there anything you'd like to add? No. Well, thank you for joining us. He says you're welcome. Okay, anyway, this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next week.